Hi, I'm Barbara. I'm an indie author, barbaralund.com, just in case you all are interested. I have 5 novels and 25 short stories out there. I've worked with freelance editors quite a bit to get everything ready for publishing.
I'm Kristy Nielson. I also publish under CMAdler. I have been full-time freelance editing for a year. Previous, I taught English for 15 years. And you can find my writing at queensandcrows.com or my editing services at nielsoneditingco.com.
I'm Melanie Nichols. I publish under my initials M.A. Nichols, and I'm an indie author. Published around a dozen books, so I've worked a lot with various editors over the years. And if you want to find me online, I'm ma-nichols.com.
Awesome. Nick? I'm Nic Nelson. I'm the founder and head coach of Wordsmith Writing Coaches. We do a lot of academic editing and nonfiction book editing, but we also work with fiction authors. We do poetry, screenplays, children's books, all kinds of genre fiction. Although we did lose our horror guy recently, so. Was
it a gruesome accident?
That would be I wish it was. That would be really cool. But fortunately for him, he possesses all his limbs and is fully functional.
He's horror. Come on, he should have an untimely demise.
Yes. Well, he's got the heart of a child in a little jar on his desk.
All right. So, to get us started, when you're hiring a freelance editor, it's important to know what you're hiring them for. So, panel, could you speak to the types of editing you might hire someone for and why?
Oh boy. Do you want me to start this one? Yeah, okay. So, we have a team of 8, and so when it really depends. When we are contacted by a potential new client, we do an initial consultation with them, which is free. And this is exactly what we talk about. We will interview you to find out, what is your work in progress, your manuscript, what are you writing, and what are your goals as an author? Is this a calling card book? Are you a lawyer or a dentist or something, or some kind of thought leader? And this, you want to just be able to say, comma, and author at the end of your bio, or are you beginning a career as an author in a particular topic or genre? So we find out who you are and what it is that you're writing, and then we look at the manuscript, and we'll say, wow, this is great. All the pieces are here. I think, with a copy edit and a proofread, you'll be ready to go. Or we will suggest some other kind of developmental editing, and there's a lot of different things we might suggest: a manuscript critique, or a full developmental edit, or we might refer you to a certain critique group that we happen to know of that specifically could help you out. In Los Angeles, there's a great critique group run by a friend of mine named Marco Subius. It's called West Side Weird. And they do paranormal and urban fantasy and horror and all kinds of cool stuff. And there are a bunch of seasoned writers over there, and they're super friendly. So, that kind of thing. Anybody else chime in on that?
Yeah. I think something that I use personally that I also offer is a plot edit. So you can edit the structure of a story before you spend a lot of time putting the words down. Then there's writing coaching. So if you don't even know how to go about your writing process, but you have an idea, that's available. There's the developmental edit that Nic already mentioned. That is, once you have maybe a first draft or a partial draft constructed, where we look at, it's the same thing as a plot edit would be, essentially looking at the story structure and the character development. And then you have your content line edits, which is where you feel like your story structure is really solid. but you need help making it sound good. With descriptions, dialogue. I find that people are either good at dialogue or they're not. That's what I hear a lot from clients. Or there's the final line edit proofreading, which is the final polish.
I think the biggest thing, all of that, is to be very clear and to talk with the person that you're hiring and make sure that everyone understands and is on the same page of what you're getting and what you're paying for. And then remembering that you're the one hiring them. And so you, as the author, make the final call.
I would, just to add on to that is look at the kind of advice and critique they're going to give back to you varies significantly from editor to editor. And I personally, I don't want my editor to fix the problem. And when I want them to just point out there is a problem, and because a lot of times the way they would fix it, like if you're talking to someone with a developmental edits or something, really they should be just telling you, here's the problems that we're finding. And if you have a conversation with them, maybe they'll suggest some solutions. But I found quite a few of the editors that I've worked with have tried to fix the problem for me, which I did not care for. It's not my cup of tea.
And we'll ask you, some of my clients love it when I suggest possible solutions, and other people are just like you. They're like, no, just let me do it. Let me do it. And so that's why we need to talk with you. And, if you're talking with an editor who help us out. Like if we haven't asked the right questions, tell us, hey, by the way, I would really appreciate it if this. And if you don't have any particular opinions, tell us that too. Tell us, I'm still kind of trying to figure things out. But hey, when suddenly you realize, oh, I have a strong opinion now, let us know. Because this is an evolving, growing process. It ought to be if it's a healthy one.
Yeah.
Communication
is key. Oh, go ahead, please.
I was just saying what Barbara and Melanie were talking about is that there should be an initial interview process essentially between the author and the editor as far as style matching. That's not the word I'm looking for, but compatibility.
Or at least at the very minimum, you give them a few pages where they will edit and send it back to you. Because I've actually never had a conversation with my editors other than emailing, because it's all just long distance, and I actually don't have a lot of communication with my editor. But and so I really need to see what they're going to do with how they're going to go about editing. And so that's generally when you're trying to find someone, make sure that they take a few of your pages, and most editors will give you at least a couple pages to show how they work, and we'll do that a little bit for free or for a minimal price, and allow you to do just a couple pages or a chapter.
And that's really invaluable, just to see. Sorry, go ahead.
No, even if an editor is charging for their samples, which normally just means that editor is getting a lot of requests and they can't do 15 free samples in a week. It's really worth your money to get the sample, because if you can get the samples, you can pick the right fit instead of paying, $1,000 to get your epic copy edited and then get to the end and be like, that I don't like the way they did commas at all. Figure it out with the $20 to $50 to get the sample instead.
Yeah, don't do what Melanie did when she first started out, because I did not do that, and I spent a lot of money on editors that did not work for me. But learning experience, that's okay. I mean, it's one of those things. As my dad says, if a problem can get fixed with money, it's not that big of a problem. I mean, even though I didn't have a lot of money, it was much better than other problems I've come across. So.
That's true. All right. So in a freelance editor and author relationship, who's in charge? And if one person is in charge, and who's in charge of what in the relationship?
That's a great question. the person doing the hiring is in charge of the final decision. But that's also leading into some of the caveats of when I get an edit back from my editor, I read it all and then I let it sit for like 3 days. I don't argue with my editor ever, but I will make changes and say, does this work? If he's pointed out something major, I will ask, does this work? Does this fix the problem that you saw? And some little edits that I can tell is a stylistic thing and not necessarily a this is wrong, but this could be better if. And some of them, if I intend the verbiage to be exactly how I want it, then I will decline the edit. And he's fine with that because we've had that conversation that as me paying him to edit my stuff, I make the final call.
That's absolutely true. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's one of the things that I love about the indie versus traditional publishing route is that with traditional publishing, the editor is the boss. They're the one who own the rights to your book. They are the ones in charge. But with the indie, it's my editor is my contracted employee. Like I'm hiring them, and I can choose to listen to them or not. And yeah, sometimes what they are saying is just their own opinion. Everyone, editors, beta readers, reviewers, comes into your book with their own baggage and experience, and how they experience your story will be different than the way you experience it. And sometimes they will make comments or requests that are purely their own experience, and isn't necessarily that the book is broken. They've just experienced your story differently than what other people will. And in those cases, you can choose what you want to do. If you want to change it, great. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And I really like that because, like I said, there isn't a standard way that people experience your book. It's not something that everyone is going to have the same experience. And so, changing everything to fit one person's perspective, your editor's perspective, is going to not necessarily make your book better. It's just going to make it different, and I prefer to just focus on things that'll make it better, but still maintain to the way I want my book to be.
Yeah, the analogy I use with my clients, because it's funny how many authors are actually have this question. It's like, wait, you understand you're hiring me, right? Like, of course you're in charge. But I use the metaphor of a contractor, a building contractor, and you want a certain kind of work done, and then they come in and do the work. But like for the developmental editing, I'm just making suggestions, like Melanie and Barbara have said. I see problems. I offer them to you. I might have a couple of suggestions, but here's some problems that I see. And maybe I'm not even seeing the problems correctly, and so I'll ask some meta questions, saying, "Now, did you mean to set up this tension? Because I see this tension being set up, but then it's not resolved later. So was that accidental? Like which part of the do we need to fix the setup and get rid of it, or do we need to fix the payoff and create it? Sometimes that's not clear. But once we get into the copy editing and the line editing, it's a little bit more like what Melanie was just saying. Like she has a certain author voice, and I may correct things or use commas in a certain way, and she doesn't like it, and she reject that edit, accept that change, reject that change, accept that change, whatever, that's fine. But when we get down to the proofreading and the formatting, you can't change what I've done. Like really, you're paying me money to understand the Chicago Manual of Style and Garner's English usage and all those other things. Like if the word just is not spelled that way and it's not a creative thing, like you can't, you're publishing this in the American market and all the rest of your book is in American English. You cannot spell maneuver. You can't, I mean, let's change it all to British English if you want, but so you
Right.
you as an author, you like, look, if I'm worth paying my invoice, then there comes a point in the editing where, look, listen to me, or why are
Trust the
why are we
expert.
even? Yeah, exactly.
I think Christine had a comment as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the simplest way to think of who's hiring who or who's working for who is to track the way the money is flowing. So if you're paying someone for a job, then you are their boss. However, like Nick said, you have to remember what you're paying them to do. So if you're going to pay an editor that you've chosen good money, you might want to listen to what they're saying to you, at least with that consideration. The book is still yours, and I think it's very important from the outset for you to, between you and your editor, for that editor to understand exactly what it is that they're doing for you. And if you have any strong absolutes or preferences, or even a personal style guide, is always very handy.
Oh, by the way, we create that. Can I? Do you guys mind if I give this away? Because
Go for it.
some editors are like, shush.
It's a big secret.
I know, right? No, seriously, guys, there's a thing called a style sheet. And all of us who've worked in actual publishing houses, we have it because the manuscript will go from you to a different editor. And so you have to keep a style sheet on the manuscript that you're editing so that the next person knows, oh, we're not doing Oxford commas here, or whatever the style decision is. Oh, we're capitalizing these pronouns, but not capitalizing these for a certain the author has a certain thing that they're doing. So we keep all that in a style sheet, so that, if it goes to another editor, the other editor is not undoing the first editor's intentional decisions, but also so that when you come back to us with your second book in the series, we just pull up that old style sheet, and now we know how all the characters' names are supposed to be spelled. And we know all those, those weird things that you do with your author voice. And we're like, okay, well, it sounds weird to me, but this is her voice and her fans love it. So, we're going to, every time the word church appears, it's capitalized because that's wrong, but whatever, like, we're doing it. Okay. So we keep a style sheet like that for all of you. And this is one of the things I teach in self-editing is create a style sheet for yourself. For each different series that you write, have a style sheet. It's going to save you so much time.
Yeah, and that's something you should be able to get from your editor if they don't offer it to you freely. You should be able to ask for it because that gives you the freedom to work with whatever editor you need for a given project.
Exactly. And I will freely give you my style sheet so that you can go and work with Kristy instead. But some editors will not, because the style sheet is technically their intellectual property. I think that's weird, but
I think that's weird. That's in all my contracts that one of the deliverables is the style sheet so that you don't even have to ask me for it. Like, you just have it. So author is the boss of the project. I do think it's also important to note that the editor is probably the boss of their time, though. Like, if you're coming to hire someone, you can only hire them for the next available time that they have. And that probably isn't tomorrow. Like, you need to respect their business processes, the way that they onboard new clients, the way they run their business is their job, and they're the boss of that. You are 100% always the boss of your book and the boss of the particular project you're working on. But I have had some people who try to be like, well, if I'm going to pay you, then you have to start work tomorrow. And I'm like, then don't pay me. I don't want your money. You can wait 3 months until I have an opening, or I don't need your money that badly. Please find someone else who is ready to start work tomorrow. How do you politely yet firmly express your views, either as an editor or as an author, since we don't always see eye to eye?
Politely yet firmly. That's good.
I don't know why people seem to think that you can't be firm and kind at the same time. That if you are holding firm to something that it must be mean. I'm like, no, you can be firm, you can be polite, you can be kind, and And granted, nowadays we don't really have civil discourse isn't as big of a thing anymore, and agreeing to disagreeing is not really a thing anymore. But you can, it just be nice. I mean, you can still be polite while saying thank you, but no, and acknowledge what they are doing, acknowledge the effort that they've done, express gratitude for what they're trying to do, because what they're trying to do is make your book better. And so acknowledge that they're not trying to destroy you. So, acknowledge it, and then just say, thanks, but I'm going to go a different route, or this is not what I want. The vision I have for my book. So.
And sometimes that turns into, you promised me this a month ago. Are you alive? And thank you so much, but now I'm taking this in a different direction.
Yeah, that's a toughie. Yeah,
perfectly valid. That's always rough, but that's valid. Like you have a business arrangement for a reason, and hopefully you have a contract outlining when things are due and why. And things happen, but if the communication isn't there, and if what you've agreed upon isn't being met, then it might mean saying, I need to go somewhere else. And that's okay.
You have every right to do that.
Yeah, the regular communication, I think, is part of being polite and firm. Disappearing on anybody is not really ever okay. But if you have that dialogue and you spend a few minutes even talking about the book ahead of time, or really establishing the needs and wants of the author, then it builds a relationship through which you can say, hey, this isn't, I know that you are in love with this. It's not actually contributing to your story. Is there another story that at some point in time you can talk about something that you love, like, baseball? I've worked with authors who want to put something in that they have a passion for that actually has nothing whatsoever to do with the story, that kind of thing. But it is, like Melanie was talking about, I think there's acknowledgement goes a long way when you acknowledge what it is the author's trying to accomplish, and then pointing out why you don't think what they've tried is working toward, getting their story toward what they want it to be, and what you would recommend and why you would recommend what you do.
That why is a big deal. Any other thoughts on that, or should we move to the next question?
Next.
Okay. Next topic. All right. I don't expect everyone's answers to be the same on this. I'm excited to get to one where I'm like, this should be different. What traits make an ideal client? Like from the editor side, what makes an ideal client for you? And from the author side, what makes an ideal editor for you?
I want to hear from the authors. What makes an ideal editor for you? I want to be that person.
For me, it's a lot the communication. A ton the communication. If they respond quickly, even if it's to say, I can't get to this for a week or a month, and can you work with that? That's great. Just talk to me. The other thing is I've had a couple different editors, and the one that has been able to match my own voice the best, I think, is the best fit so far, which is really interesting. As I become a better writer, we'll find out as if he can continue to match my voice.
Probably, if he continues to have that experience working with your writing, it's likely.
Okay, and from my perspective as an author, I want someone who will be honest with me. First off, and they have to push me. I have gone through multiple editors over the course of my publishing career, and I finally found one that I really liked, and she was a great fit for that level of writing that I was doing, and eventually reached a point where I didn't feel like I was getting as much good feedback from her. She was doing great with like the line edit side of things, but I wasn't getting as much critique about things I needed to change about the story. And I know my story is not perfect. No matter how good it is, it's not perfect. And so I started looking for other editors that were going to continue to push me. And our relationship had run its course, and it was time for me to find someone else who was going to find other things that I could work on and grow on. And I will forever love that first editor of mine, because she really pushed me in the ways that I needed to be pushed at that time. And so I want someone who is going to be honest with me and straight up say what needs to be improved, while still understanding that, again, that I'm different than she is. And I having editors that understand the difference between style and broken is a big deal. There's not all the various editors I've worked with. Not all of them understood that something was different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. That it's just a difference of opinion and a stylistic thing. And so having an editor that not only understands my style but wants to encourage me to develop it in my it to be its best thing, even if it doesn't entirely match the way they would do things.
Oh yeah, like there's that book for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Yeah, so huge bestseller. I think it was like a Caldecott book winner or something, and it's written in a horrible style, but it's poetically beautiful and emotionally moving. And boy, I'd love to see the style sheet for that book, because it's incredibly detailed, because it's got to keep track of all the hundreds of rules you're breaking, because you have to break them all consistently and wisely. And so yeah, that's a great example of understanding the difference between the author's voice being unique and idiosyncratic, and this is just broken, like this is not working.
Yeah, that the author doesn't understand that they're breaking the rules. They're just, it's. I've done a lot of art as well, and it seems like everyone who's starting out in art wants to immediately do like abstract. And I'm like, the abstract painters don't go that route until they learn the rules of how to actually paint real stuff. And once you know how to do it, then you can break the rules. But if you're just doing whatever you feel like, no, it's got to be purposeful.
Right. I believe Christine would have a great perspective on this, where you're both an author and an editor, so you can kind of see both sides. Could you speak to that?
And we were talking about like essentially compatibility in some respects, right? So what is it that makes an editor a good editor for you, and what is it that makes an author a good author for you as an editor? So as an author, I kind of err on the other side of Melanie, where I do prefer for the editor to give me a suggestion, where 99% of the time it's not what I want to do with the story. I don't take the suggestion, but it does help me at least narrow down the direction that I do want to take. So I do prefer suggestions, and for someone to be extremely hands-on with my manuscript. And from the editing side with an author, for me, it really just boils down to communication. And I think understanding, because I've worked with people who don't care about publishing. They don't care about, getting it out into the market and making any money. Sometimes it's a personal memoir. Sometimes it's honestly, I've worked with some older gentlemen. I don't know why they're all guys, but who writing a book and publishing a book was on their bucket list, but making any money from the book doesn't matter. What?
Vanity projects.
Yes, a vanity project. Good.
Yeah.
It's just part of their bucket list. But then I also work with authors who are very professional, and they understand that this is a product, and they're like, yep, please dig in and make it everything that needs to be. And honestly, I handle those things very differently. So if it's someone's passion project, I am more hands-off and a little bit more invested in telling them what's good and what's working, and changes are typically minimal because they have a vision. Not without discussion. I'm still very straightforward and blunt. And then when it's someone who's a professional, I talk about marketability and readability, and the reasons for a lot of the changes and suggestions are mostly to help them reach their audience and to make the book more appealing and sellable.
All right. And then, thank you. And then Nic, what makes an author what about an author can make them just super easy to work with for you?
Well, it's interesting because it's exactly the same things that that Melanie was saying earlier. An ideal client is going to communicate with me clearly and completely and in a timely manner. An ideal client is going to help me understand their voice. Like there's it doesn't happen often. It's happened less recently, but when I was first trying to figure out this whole, especially genre fiction editing, I there were times when I was working with certain clients who don't have the self confidence that Barbara and Melanie have, or that Christine has, and they would like I would edit things and I would accidentally suck some of the magic out of their author voice. Like not completely. It didn't sound like me. It still sounded like I thought they sounded. But um, but after we were done, I overheard them talking to someone else and saying, I yeah, I guess like everything is correct now, but I'm kind of sad because I really wanted to say things a certain way and I guess I'm not allowed to. And I was like, no, do like talk to me. Like we could but it was, I felt like it was too late. And so please talk to me. Yeah, like I want to match your voice. I want to preserve your author voice. If you feel like you don't have one yet, I want to help you develop one. And I think I'm speaking for every professional editor out there. Um, and and then the part of that, part of the first one, like communicating in a timely manner, and communicating like honestly and everything. I guess I'm lumping this in with the first one. Is uh, I would like an ideal client will treat me like a partner and not like a service provider. Um, and partly that has to do with not demanding that I get started immediately. Uh, what Kristy said, yeah, that's not professional. I've actually just not worked with authors who are like that, because if that's how they're acting in the beginning of the project, oh my goodness, just wait till we get to the closing invoice. Forget it. I'm not even going to go there. Um, but yeah, let's tell me. Don't hide from me the things that are going on in your life. I think, in an earlier panel, I talked about a client of mine who, uh, working with her stretched on for about 5 years because she had a very serious physical illness that cropped up at a critical point in the manuscript development. And she was honest with me and told me exactly what was happening and everything. And so I was able to I sat down and I made a ton of notes about everything that was in my mind about this project. Like her style sheet was like 8 pages long, um, or God, maybe longer. And uh, because I knew that I was going to have to sort of I wasn't just putting this on the back burner. This project was going in the fridge, and I would need to pull it out and warm it up again later. And if she had not been honest with me about what she was going through and how this might affect things and what she wanted, it would have felt like she had ghosted me, and I might not even have. I don't know. Anyway,
You wouldn't have retained all the information as well.
I wouldn't have retained all the information. I might not have retained her as a client.
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't hear from you in 7 months, don't assume that I actually still have your manuscript.
Yeah. All right. We could keep talking about lots of topics for a lot longer, but I want to make sure that we cover the topics that the audience really needs covered. So I'd like to open it up to questions now so we can start answering some of those.
Okay.
Awesome.
Linz asks, do you track the authors you work with to see, after they're published, how many of your suggestions or edits were used?
Christine, would you like to answer that one?
I'll get this one started. So I am newer in the professional editing arena. I've been editing professionally for a year, so I don't know that I have seen any long-term versions of that. But I don't know that I need to. Like, I've done multiple rounds for the authors I've worked for, things like that. So yes, I can see what they like and what they don't like, and where they want to take the story. And one guy had me do a lot of ghostwriting for him when he was like, yes, I agree, I need that scene. I have no idea how to write that scene. Things like that. But as far as, like, you mean purchasing someone's final published book and going back through the book to see if they followed the edits, I don't.
What about you?
It's not my book. It's their book. If they took it, or that's the author's final choice. And really, like, we will all own, like Nic said, when it comes down to something technical, we would like to think that you listen to what we're telling you to do. That's what you paid us for. But ultimately, it's your book, and you get to make those choices. So I don't take any of that personally. I do follow through with the satisfaction level of my client, but not necessarily how many of my suggestions they actually implemented in the manuscript.
That's
Nic,
the
do you have a
key.
different take on that?
No, exactly the same. And that the last thing that Christine said sums it up perfectly. It's, I'm paying attention to your satisfaction level. So, but on the other hand, I mean, I don't. The way the question was asked was interesting. I My time is valuable. I got bills to pay. I'm not going to go through the entire manuscript and, like, oh, did she accept this? Okay, there's a hash mark in the accept column and there's a hash mark in the reject column. I don't care, whatever. However, I am going to notice when you send me your manuscript for the final proofread that you completely ignored everything that I said about, like, this critical point here. And not only is the problem still there, but you made it worse. And, like, I'm I'm gonna say something about it, but if we're in the proofread stage, I'm not gonna change it or anything. I may put a margin comment, but yeah. I mean, if I was line editing, I would engage you in a conversation there, and I would suggest some things, and I would highlight something and say, "Do you see how you've repeated the same phrase 4 times in 2 paragraphs," or whatever, But if I've said that already, and you're like, "No, no, repeat same phrase 4 times in the paragraph and have, like, 2 different characters saying it exactly the same way," that's fine. But okay, y- you know, I
Yeah.
it's just weird.
Yeah.
I'll keep working
Thank
with
you.
you. That's fine.
Thank you, Nic. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, what you decide to do with your book is your deal, and I don't need to hunt down and see, did you listen to me or did you not listen to me? Like, no, you did what you thought was best for your book, whether you went with what I said or went with something else. Like, that was what you thought was best for your book. So I don't really care, so long as you are happy with your edit. I might skim back through a book if there was something that was, like, morally gray for me, where, like, if something was really racist and I recommended you take it out, I might go check that before I, like, put you in my portfolio. Um, but but
Good point.
just to just to check to see if you listen to me, like, I don't care. That's your business. You're the boss.
Although
Next question.
every once in a while, I will like, ask them not to list me as an editor.
Yeah. That can happen if there's content issues like that, or if you take so few of the recommendations that it kind of feels like the editor didn't work on it.
It doesn't
Then
make me look good. Yeah.
we might ask that you don't put us in the acknowledgments or something. So it's always good to ask if you can put someone in the acknowledgments rather than assuming that you can unless they say not to. Just some people don't like the spotlight anyway, and there could be lots of reasons why they don't want to be in the acknowledgments. Some people don't like the spotlight, just don't want to be there, or it might be that they don't feel like they contributed enough to your book to warrant that pride of place. Next question.
Lisa asks, editors, how much money do you ask for up front? Authors, what amount up front do you think is reasonable?
Let's start with editors. Christine, how much do you ask for up front?
I ask for 50% of the estimate to block out the time on my calendar.
What about you, Nick?
Christine's normal. I'll do that for shorter projects. If it's a really long project, I might ask for 20%, but no less than 20%. And shorter things usually are a flat fee. Like if it's just a manuscript critique, I'll get started when you pay the $400.
I asked for 50% as well.
I think that's normal.
Especially just the amount of time one has to block out to read a novel. It's really hard if that gets canceled on you, because if that gets canceled the day before and I have no money in the bank, I cannot go find some other novel to read in 24 hours. Like that's not work I can make up. So there's got to be some sort of like financial commitment to compensate the editor if you end up needing to cancel or reschedule, and also to make sure that you're serious. Authors, what do you think is reasonable?
Oh, can I just throw in one more thing there, just from what you said? If you're working with an editor and they do not ask for 50% upfront, look at the contract carefully, because they may have something in there called a kill fee. Because exactly what Kristy is saying, if it's a longer contract and they're asking for anything less than 50%, there may be a kill fee of several $100s. So anyway, go ahead.
I have done all of those, as well as a 25, 25, 50. So 25 up front and 25 on the first, and usually that's for the big projects with several passes. So 25 up front, 25 on the first return of edits, and then 50 at the end. So it just depends on, what your editor would like and how good your relationship is with them. I've done 100% at the end, but only once the relationship is established, and it's usually very, very short pieces.
For me, I actually, sorry.
I was just going to say that it bottom line is there's some flexibility and room for negotiation. Sorry, go ahead, Melanie.
No, I have a different approach, because I actually have gotten all of my editors through Fiverr.com, and using contract services like that, in which case it's actually 100% upfront. However, if the editor doesn't deliver, I get all my money refunded. Like, Fiverr protects me and keeps it so that they deliver on time, and if they don't, I get a refund. And so there's no risk involved. If I wasn't going that route, I probably would, the 50% is, most of the editors I looked at outside of that was said 50% up front. So somewhere around there, 25 to 50%.
Right. Next question. I popped out, but I assume we covered everything we're talking about.
Yeah. Next question.
Marnie, do we have another question?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Alana asks, what does it look like when an author-editor relationship ends, for good or bad?
Anyone want to snag that? I can speak to it, but
go ahead.
So I've had a client who had me look at their manuscript like 6 or 7 times during the developmental edit process, and then they asked me to copy edit it. And I said no, because I wasn't a good fit for that anymore. I had read the manuscript way too many times to be the copy editor. I was going to miss all sorts of stuff. And so it just wasn't good. And so I was able to explain that. I was able to say, hey, I'm not a great fit for this project. I can recommend this list of other people. Thank you so much for all that we've been able to do together, but I want your book to succeed. So please go to someone else that isn't me. And that's kind of a good way to end working relationships in general, because that's normally what it boils down to, is that something about their work style or their manuscript just isn't a good fit anymore. And it might be you've read it too many times, or it might be they're starting to have a lot of content that the editor is uncomfortable with. Maybe the editor can't handle torture scenes, and there's a lot of torture scenes in their fiction. Well, the editor's not the right editor for them. And the editor doesn't need to say, oh, you're writing torture scenes and those are the worst thing ever. You can just say, I'm not comfortable with that. I think you should find someone else. Here's some other resources you can use to find someone else to work with you.
Yeah,
And I think Barbara
100%.
had some comments.
Barbara?
I had a not as easy transition with my first to second editor. My first editor just started dropping off the face of the earth and not responding to emails. So pretty much wrapped up the last project I had with him, checked again to see if there was anything that he would respond to. And when he didn't, I moved on.
Yeah. One good thing that you should look for in like contracts that you have with a freelance editor is you should see how you go about ending that relationship for whatever reason. Maybe it's, your life has imploded and you just can't work on writing for the next 5 years. Maybe it's you found someone who's a better fit. Maybe you felt like there could be all sorts of reasons that are in no way personal, but make sure that the contract or the agreement that you sign has some sort of plan for how that relationship can end. Because then if you need to end the relationship, you can just follow those guidelines and that's all you have to do. And it doesn't have to be a big deal for either person.
And I have those things written into my standard contract.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I'm so glad that early on, Melanie described how she kind of outgrew an editor that she had really liked. It's not like she didn't like that editor anymore. It's just that she needed something different in an editor, and that was going to require a new editor. Totally fine, guys. We're here to serve. We're not, we don't want to be like, that weird boyfriend who like won't leave you alone. Like that's not professional, and we are professionals. So, on the other hand, I think all of us editors would very much like to understand why you're moving on. Because it's sort of a it's not you, it's me sort of thing, but be honest with us about that. As I hope Melanie was honest with her first editor and saying, yeah, I feel like my writing craft is in a place where I need a different voice to speak into that now. Someone who perhaps
I
has
wish I had as well.
Yeah, okay, well, that's fine.
It was hard because it was one of those things where I felt like we weren't necessarily good friends because we just exchanged emails and such, but at the same time it wasn't her, it was me, that I was just moving on, and so I just didn't hire her the next time, and
that is also completely valid.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah,
so I don't need to know. If we wrap this up and I don't hear from you again, I'm not going to assume that it's a breakup.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I'm like I don't switch editors in the middle of a project, or at least in the middle of the contract. I just wait till the contract's over and then I just find someone else. Is generally how I handle it. But again, I'm in a different position and I'm using contracting services through another group, and I don't tend to have my editors re-edit my project multiple times. So it's a different. I'm in a slightly different situation, but yes, the easiest way to do it is just not hire them. Again, for me, I felt like to go to her and actually tell her specifically, I am not hiring you again. It felt a little crueler than simply just letting it go, and moving on. So.
No, in your situation, it sounds perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
I actually had a client this past summer, as a matter of fact, who, we had a great initial consultation. She paid the, initial deposit. I got started, when I said I was going to get started, which actually turns out to have been an issue. So I was very clear with her in writing, in the scope of work, when I was going to start, which was about 4 or 5, I don't remember now exactly, but it was more than a month after she paid the initial deposit. And 3 weeks after she paid the deposit, she checked with me like 3 or 4 emails and at least 4 phone calls within about a 48-hour span of time, wondering if I had finished chapter 1 yet. And I was like, I'm starting in a few days.
Yeah, not there yet.
Haven't opened the manuscript. I have not opened the file yet. I'll get to it. And without going into detail, things escalated from there, and I just, you know, please, the contract. It's not like, when you download an app or something and you get the thing and you just scroll to the bottom and click I agree because you want to use the app. Don't do that
Yeah.
with an editing contract. Like,
Yeah.
an editing contract is a relationship description.
Thank you, Nick. I think we need to wrap up so that the room can get used to the next people. So yes, open communication, read and listen and talk is basically like any relationship. You need good communication for the freelance editor-author relationship, that as well. Thank you all so much for coming out to our panel.
Thank you.
Yay, everybody.
Yeah.